only thing we have to fear is
in war.
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. You're tuning in today to part 4 of Biblical Principles and the Political Process. So if you're finding our radio program for the first time, or maybe just the first time this week, you missed the first 3 parts of this series, but that's okay. We're still going to have some great information for you today. You'll enjoy it even if you missed the first 3 parts. But if you'd like to go back and get that great information in parts 1, 2, and 3, it's available right now on our website at wallbuilderslive.com. Click on that archive button and it'll take you to the last few months of programs, including the last 3 days where you'll get part 1, part 2, and part 3. And today we're going to enjoy the conclusion. It's called Biblical Principles in the Political Process. It's a new DVD by David Barton addressing this very important issue, this idea that the Bible actually has a lot to say about the political process and how we as believers should approach it. So let's pick up right where we left off yesterday for the conclusion of Biblical Principles and the Political Process. Here's David Barton.
The people you want in office are the people who don't want to be there. The George Washingtons, every time he got a chance, he retired. He went back to Mount Vernon. John Adams, he didn't want to be there. Patrick Henry turned down election. Well, actually, I say turn down. You know, the Founding Fathers taught that you're not allowed to turn down an election. If the people say, I want you to be whatever, I want you to be mayor or governor, you're not allowed to say no. Now, Benjamin Rush, remember, I told you he's the father of public schools under the Constitution. Look what he taught in schools and taught students. And he says, very simply, he, a citizen, must love private life. Love your business, love your family, but he must decline no station, however public or responsible it may be, when called to it by the votes of his fellow citizens. If I come out and say, they've chosen you to be governor, you're going to serve? You're not allowed to say, no, I'm not going to serve, because that's being selfish. That means your life belongs to yourself. They said, we need you serving. You exist to serve others. And that's what Benjamin Rush pointed out. Remember, none lives to himself. That's Romans 14:7. Nobody lives to themselves. He says, even our old age is not our property. All of us fruits of wisdom and experience belong to the public. God made us to serve other people. And if other people come to you and say, we need you on the school board, for you to say, no, I'm not going to be there, that's pure selfishness, because now you have an opportunity to serve in a community. See, that's the way we were taught in previous generations, that you are here to serve others, not here to serve yourself. That's why we had such better political leaders in previous generations, because as much as I didn't want to be it, they told me that I need to be, and so I'm going to serve in office. And those are the best people, because when they get there, they'll actually serve. They're not there for the money. They're not there for the name. They're not there for the fame. They're there, and they recognize they got a job to do, and they're going to get it done. And that's the best people you want. So that's the way we looked at elections. Now, you look at this choose out. There's another interesting thing here. Who is it that does the choosing? We often say, well, it's elections. The people do the choosing. No, this was a command given to Moses, the leader. And Moses records that I was told to choose out, and I did, and I brought them to you, and then you voted for them. But I'm the one that went and recruited the leaders on this thing. And so what you find is the biblical model is that while the people vote to ratify, a lot of times it's a spiritual leader who does the choosing. I mean, think about when Saul was anointed king. Who was it who anointed Saul king? The Electoral College? No. It goes back. It was the prophet Samuel who said, you're the guy that's supposed to be in civil government. And when David became king, who chose him to be? Well, it was Samuel that chose David and said, hey, God's chosen you to be in civil government. And then when Solomon became king, who chose him? Well, it was Nathan and Gad that went and anointed Saul. It was always the spiritual leaders choosing out the civil leaders, and then there was the vote, if you would. That's where the people ratified and chose who they wanted. But why is it that the church doesn't do this today? Oh, I'm not going to have anything to do with politics. No. From Judges 9 and from all throughout the Scriptures, it's supposed to be the spiritual leaders that say, hey, you know, I've watched you, I've watched your family, you're doing a great job with your business. We need you over here on the Public Utility Board. We need you over here on the junior college board. And it was spiritual leaders who would go to others and say, you need to be serving your community in a bigger way. And there's a lot you can offer. And so that was the notion, but we don't do that anymore. I mean, and now how come we don't? You know, because we bought in this thing, the church is not supposed to be involved in stuff. That's not biblical, it's not historical, it's not constitutional. We buy into it. But there's another thing that goes with this. We're very sophisticated. I am from Texas, and in Texas we have a very pro-life legislature. No question that we've passed all sorts of pro-life laws. And because of the technology we now have in so many areas, I get these great emails from pro-life groups in the state that says, hey, your state representative is so-and-so, and there is a meeting in a committee today at 2:30, and he's part of that committee, and you need to call him right now and tell him to vote against this amendment. And they keep me informed on every single pro-life measure that comes up, and when I need to contact my rep, and what I need to tell him, and I love it. You know, high technology is there. And I've probably, over this last session, gotten 50 emails from them on pro-life bills as they're going through and how to weigh in and have an influence. I appreciate what they do, but I've never made one call. 50 opportunities, I've never contacted my state rep one time. Why? Am I lazy? No, it's not that at all. It's because I'm the one who recruited my state rep to run for office. I know what he believes. See, the problem is that you want to recruit people you don't have to lobby. If I have to call my state rep and say, you need to vote pro-life, I've already lost the battle. He should be there because he's going to vote pro-life or defend marriage or religious liberties or understand that we need limited government or that the city is not supposed to be punishing you if you want to stand for your Christian. You elect people to office that you don't have to lobby, and that's what you want to do. But having said that, what that really means is you have to recruit people for office you don't want to lobby. Because the good guys just don't step up. I mean, you got to recruit them, you got to push them forward, and that's the role of we as believers, as people of faith, as biblical folks, as churches.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In the minds of many today, government is a purely secular institution and is not in any way to be joined to religious principles. The result is that too often our public policies are now enacted without any consideration of their spiritual consequences. However, the Founding Fathers believed that even a political act should always be examined from a spiritual viewpoint. For example, in his inaugural address, President George Washington declared, "We ought to be persuaded that the favorable smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained." President George Washington believed that the blessings of heaven would reside on this nation only so long as its national policies embraced godly standards.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We got to start pushing the good guys out and say, we need you. It's time for your service. There's way too much corruption going on here. We got to have a different worldview. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. We got way too many thorn bushes. We've got to get in that process again. So having said that, this is how we had done this historically and biblically, and this is what we understood the role of the pulpit was. Now, let me take you from that into looking at the problem we're having today with this biblical notion. Because go back to Exodus 18:21. Remember what Exodus 18:21 says. It says, "You shall select from all the people able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, rulers of tens." Now, this is the election process. This is what creates a Republican form of government. By the way, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution requires we be a Republican form of government, that we choose leaders. We're not a democracy. We're not intended to be a democracy. We're not allowed to be a democracy. We have to be a Republican form of government. We choose leaders at all these different levels. Founding Fathers actually who helped do the Constitution quoted Exodus 18:21 as the reason they did this in Article 4, Section 4. But go back and notice the qualification for office. God said, "You shall select from all the people able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness." Now, that's the four universal qualifications you look for, whether they're dog catchers or President of the United States. You want to look for people who are able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Those are the 4 universal qualifications you start with at every level of office. But notice something. Notice how that able man comes before fear of God. A lot of time we say, oh, I want God-fearing people. Great. But why does God put able man in front of God-fearing? Is it that he doesn't think God-fearing is important? No, he does. But what happens is a lot of times you get God-fearing people in office who are absolutely incompetent, and they make God-fearing people look like a bunch of dwarfs because they're not good at what they do. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have able men or God-fearing men. You want all of them. But it's not enough to have a God-fearing man who's not an able man. That's why you choose people who are successful in business, or successful in what they're doing. You want them with a track record of having been productive and creating jobs and having limited government and all the things that go with it. That's what you want. So you choose able men, such as fear God. But this is where we have a difficulty today with Christians, quite frankly. The problem we have with Christian candidates, and I have gotten to the point where I no longer use terms like Christian. I've gone off of that. I don't care whether you're Christian or not. I care whether you're biblical or not. And let me give you an example. You take the United Church of Christ as a denomination of 1.2 million in America. Way back, 7 years before Roe v. Wade, as a denomination, they voted and called for abortion on demand as a church position 7 years before Roe v. Wade. Now, what Bible verse will you use to say abortion's right? Well, there's none, because the Bible has tons of verses on the other side. They may be a Christian denomination, but that's not a biblical position. In 1976, that same denomination called for same-sex marriages. Tell me who was thinking about same-sex marriages in 76? This Christian denomination. That's not biblical. Have you not read Genesis 1 through 3, or specifically what Jesus said in Matthew 19, 1 through 15 about marriage being between one man and one woman? See, I can go through so many other things. So I really don't. Christian means nothing anymore. Biblical means everything. You want people who understand biblical principles, biblical truths. And I'll give you a great example. Let me just take a recent election that happened. You go to the election of 2012. In that particular election, I was one of the commentators on national news coverage on presidential election night. And I told him, look, I'm not going to do the red-blue stuff. I don't care who does the Electoral College. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the ballot initiatives, because there's 176 state ballot initiatives being elected this night. And ballot initiatives are neither Republican nor Democrat, but they tell me worldview. They tell me what people think. And if I see how people are voting on ballot initiatives, I can tell you how the election is going to turn out, because I'll know what they're thinking. And so as I watched that night, this was the second highest Christian voter, second highest evangelical voter turnout we'd had in the last 35 years. We really got our people out. So I was elated at what I thought was going to happen. And I looked at those 176 ballot initiatives, and it didn't go well. We had 4 states voting on homosexual marriage. We had 6 states voting on marijuana. And then we had all sorts of states voting on other issues. One of the issues was, should physicians kill people or save their lives? It was a 50-50 vote. They couldn't decide whether physicians should kill. Wait a minute. What are you thinking to think that physicians should kill people? And then you get into issues like gambling. Well, gambling passed everywhere it went. I mean, there was no way to stop gambling, especially casinos. Man, Christians love casinos. 75% of Christians cannot name a single Bible verse that deals with gambling. But we're out there supporting all this stuff on the other side. You know, it came Planned Parenthood. We had ballot initiatives on should the state defund Planned Parenthood. And we said, no, we like Planned Parenthood. And then we had ballot initiatives. Should the state protect religious liberties? No, we don't think the state should. I mean, these are Christians voting, and we just proved that Christians, we have this serious problem with biblical illiteracy. We don't know what the Bible says. So it's not whether you're Christian or not, it's whether you're biblical or not on all of these positions, and that's why you have to recruit so well. Now, when you look at this, George Barna has confirmed something I think is worthwhile for every Christian to see. George Barna, who's with the Barna Group, they do tens of thousands of polls over the last 30 years or so. This is what George said. He says, of the more than 70 moral behaviors we study, he says, when we compare Christians and non-Christians, we rarely find substantial differences. When we look at polling, and think of 70 moral categories. I don't know, that's adultery, that's lying, that's pornography, that's abortion. He said, when we look at you can't tell the difference between Christians and non-Christians in 70 moral categories. Let me give you some stats on that. Take something like divorce rate. Now, this is where we can tell the difference with Christians and non-Christians. So in this particular category, we have 27% of born-again Christians. That's the divorce rate for born-again Christians. Well, if you're not born-again Christian, what is it? It's 24%. Ooh, well, if you don't even like God, what is it? It's 21% for atheists. Wait a minute. The lowest divorce rate in the nation is atheist agnostics. The highest divorce rate is with born-again Christians.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In several decisions over recent years, the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that it is unconstitutional for the government to encourage religion. Did our founding fathers agree with this? Consider the words of Henry Lawrence, a signer of the Constitution and a president of Congress. Henry Lawrence declared, "I had the honor of being one who framed that Constitution. In order effectually to accomplish these great ends set forth in the Constitution, it is especially the duty of those who bear rule to promote and encourage respect for God and virtue, and to discourage every degree of vice and immorality." Founding Father Henry Lawrence believed that the goals of the Constitution could not be fulfilled apart from a fear and a respect for God, and that it was therefore the duty of government to encourage this among the people.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
So if I want my marriage to survive, I need to be an atheist, statistically? That's not the way it's supposed to work. That's not biblical. As a matter of fact, you'll find that 87% of Christians who got divorced did so after they received Christ. So apparently getting divorced is part of the new life in Christ? That's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not biblical. See, so that's one of the things that Barton Group shows. I'll show you another example. Abortion, 250,000 abortions a year performed on born-again Christians. Christians who don't know the Bible. We have homosexuality. Among active homosexuals, 27% say they're born-again Christians. Again, don't know the Bible. You also have issues of fortune-telling astrology. There is no difference in the people in percentage of Christians and non-Christians who embrace the practices of astrology, fortune-telling, psychic. The Bible's really clear on that. So issue after issue after issue, there is no statistical difference between Christians and non-Christians, 70 different issues. That's why Christian doesn't mean what it used to mean. Biblical is the term now. You want biblical folks, and you're looking for biblical folks, and that's who you're after. So the problem with Christian candidates, just a lot of them don't think biblical. Now, let me take it and kind of wrap this down by saying, okay, what do we do with strategic planning here? Let's say that you're one of those many cities who's had a non-discrimination ordinance. And by the way, in strategic planning, this comes out of the Bible. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, the Bible says, don't you know that those who run in a race all run, but only one gets the prize? So you need to run in a way that you're going to be the one who gets the prize. Now, think of the marathon in Boston or the marathon in Mexico City or Johannesburg. Tens of thousands of people run. Are they running to win? No, they're running to say, I ran in a marathon, I ran in the Boston Marathon, whatever it is. Only one person actually comes out of there with the prize. That person runs a whole different race. There'll be 30 or 40 people that are going to try to win, and they run a whole different strategy than everybody else who's just out there running. And that's what you have to understand in politics. You don't want to just run, you want to run to win, which means you have to have a very tactical and a very strategic plan on how you do it, both tactical and strategic. So in looking at what happens with city councils and other things, let's just take this non-discrimination ordinance, because it's spreading across the nation, and whatever city, I don't know, Oklahoma City or Omaha, Nebraska, or Hot Springs, Arkansas, wherever it's going to come, is suddenly you get slapped upside the head like San Antonio and said, look what they just passed. They just criminalized me speaking, me saying it. I can't even run for office if I say the homosexuality is wrong. What is the deal here? So you get all ticked off at the city council, and if it's like San Antonio, it was an 8-3 vote, and over in Honolulu, it's even more than that. So you get ticked off at them, and the first thing Christians want to do is we're going to take them all out. We're going to wipe them all. We're going to have a referendum and show them exactly what the people think on this. And then we're going to do a recall and get all those guys out of. And so they get ticked off, and they rise up, and that's what they want to do. There is an axiom that goes with lawyers in court. And lawyers in court, the axiom is you never want to ask a question to which you do not already know the answer. When you get in court, you don't want to be surprised. You want to know, and so you ask the questions to get the information out you want. You don't want to get shocked with what comes out. I didn't see that coming. So let's say, you know, you got the city council map, and we're going to do a referendum. No. You don't even want to think about a referendum unless you know you're going to win that referendum. Let's say that you get that referendum up on the ballot and you lose it by a 70-30 margin. What have you just done? You just told the city council Christians they're impotent. They have no strength. Well, we're talking about only 2% that do show up to vote. That means that basically 98% of adults aren't showing up to vote, which means probably 98% of Christians aren't showing up to vote. And unless you've got a plan to get them to show up on that referendum, you're probably going to strengthen what the city council did by telling them that we really are weakest Christians. Well, you know, those 8 guys that voted for the non-discrimination, we're going to take them out. So you run a recall election on all 8, and all 8 win the recall election. You don't take any of them out. What have you just done? You just told the city Christians never need to listen to them again. They have no power, no strength. They're way out there. What you do is you start strategic planning. Say, okay, San Antonio has got 300 churches that want to change this. All right, I want to see where those 300 churches are in those districts. I want to see where they're spread out. And if I've got a bunch of churches in one district, I know that that's a district I want to run somebody in. And if they happen to be a church over here, only 2 churches in the district, but each of them have 20,000 members in the church, that's all right. I only need churches. So I need to see where Christians are distributed. I need to see where churches are distributed. I need to go start recruiting candidates, because even though there may be a vulnerability, if I can't get a good candidate to run, if I can't get somebody to step up, then I don't want that guy to win the election and think that he's stronger because we ran a poor candidate against him. So this is where Christians have to kind of cool off and back up and say, hey, we need to do a little strategic thinking here and how we plan this and go after it. And you can't do that when you're angry. You have to back off. And anger is a good thing. And the Bible tells us to be angry, but sin not. Anger is something that gets you motivated and stirs up. And you got to get motivated and stirred up. So anger can be a good thing, but don't try to strike back when you're angry. You sit down, you calculate and say, okay, here's what we've got to do. And when you do something like that, you can change the whole image. Let's say that we're going to target 5 of those city council races. Out of the 7, we're going to target 5. If we win 5 out of 5, what have we just told the city council? Oh, these Christians are really powerful. And so next time a vote comes up, they're going to be scared to death to vote the wrong way, because they saw what happened to the 5 guys that the Christians targeted and took out. And Christians, again, biblical folks, God-fearing folks, anybody who respects biblical values. And so that is part of the strategy you have to use. You can't just get upset. I mean, we've been out of this process for so long that you can't dive back in it and think you're going to be a master at it. But you can start looking at your church and say, you know, you would be a good guy for city council. I need to go introduce you to about 30 other churches in the district. They need to know that you're the person for city council. We can all get behind you. And so you start doing the groundwork. You start doing the legwork. And at that point, you can start taking this again. But that only happens if we get our mindset back that it is proper for Christians to be involved in the civil arena.
Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
And if we don't get involved in the civil arena, we will lose our Constitution, we will lose our family, we will lose our values. And that's where we are now. Again, folks like the pastor in Phoenix spending 90 days in jail for having a Bible study in his home. If that seems unusual to you, go to religiousshostility.org. They've got 1,200 instances of those kind of things that have happened in America just in the last few years. 1,200. You don't hear it on the media. No, there's a war against our values, and if we decide to sit it out, we will have those values gone before we have a chance to respond. So this is some of the background that will be helpful as you get into political activity. And don't think of politics as a partisan thing. Think of it as salt and light in the civil arena. And if we do that, it will make a difference. If you get interested in this type of stuff, there are resources that you can go to at wallbuilders.com. Founders Bible will tell you how the founders thought about how they approached this, how the Bible shaped policy. You also have a lot of other resources there. And you can also go to the nationalblackroberegiment.com and get a lot of resources for churches and for other things in your community. So it's time for Christians to get back involved in the process. We can't be non-participants in this thing. We can't continue to be part of the 98% that don't vote in city elections. We can't be part of that 67% that doesn't vote in presidential elections, and we can't be part of that 75% that doesn't vote in governor elections. We got to get back involved in the process. Thank you guys for being here. God bless you.
Well, folks, that was David Barton on biblical principles and the political process. Thank you so much for joining us this week and listening to this series. I encourage you to go to our website today at wallbuilderslive.com. Click on that archive section. Grab those 4 parts, those 4 programs that cover this, biblical principles and the political process, and send it out to your friends and family. Encourage them to start listening to WallBuilders Live, as we're going to continue to talk about how to apply biblical principles to our culture, including the political process, but other areas of life as well. All of it can be found at our website, wallbuilderslive.com, for the radio program and for that 4-part series. Or if you'd like to get the DVD and be able to see the slides and the visuals, then you can go to wallbuilders.com and get that information there. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand under